George Michael was in the middle of Freedom 90 when a desperate voice from the crowd stopped him cold. What this mother asked him to do would lead to the most heartbreaking phone call in concert history and a moment that no one in Wembley Stadium would ever forget. It was June 25, 1991, at Wembley Stadium in London. George Michael was performing to a sold-out crowd of 50,000 fans during his Faith World Tour. The energy was electric, and George was in top form, having already mesmerized the audience with Faith, Father Figure, and Careless Whisper. Now he was launching into one of his most powerful anthems, Freedom 90. The crowd was singing along to every word, hands in the air, completely lost in the music. But halfway through the song, something happened that would change the course of the entire evening. From somewhere in the general admission section, about 20 rows back from the stage, a woman's voice cut through the music and the crowd noise like a knife through silk. It was desperate, raw, and filled with a pain that was impossible to ignore. "George, please, my daughter is dying." The voice belonged to Linda Matthews, a 42-year-old nurse from Birmingham who had driven 3 hours to London with her sister Sarah. Linda had spent her last $200 on these tickets, money she desperately needed for other things. But she had to be here tonight. She had to try. George's voice faltered slightly as he caught the words, but he continued singing, scanning the crowd to see where the voice had come from. The band kept playing, assuming it was just another enthusiastic fan, but Linda wasn't finished. With every ounce of strength she had left after months of sleepless nights and hospital vigils, she cupped her hands around her mouth and screamed again. "My little girl Lucy is in the hospital. She's only 12. Please, she's dying and you're her favorite singer." This time, George heard every word clearly. He stopped singing mid-verse and held up his hand to signal the band to stop playing. The sudden silence in Wembley Stadium was deafening. 50,000 people gradually quieted down, sensing that something important was happening. "Ma'am," George said into his microphone, his voice carrying clearly through the massive stadium. "What did you say?" Linda felt 50,000 pairs of eyes on her, but she didn't care about anything except her daughter lying in a hospital bed 12 miles away. "My daughter Lucy," Linda called out, her voice breaking. "She's 12 years old and she's dying of leukemia. She's been fighting for 2 years, and the doctors say she only has hours left." The stadium fell completely silent. You could hear people breathing, hear the rustle of clothing, hear hearts breaking in real time. George put down his microphone and walked to the edge of the stage, trying to get closer to where Linda was standing. "What's your daughter's name again?" "Lucy Matthews," Linda shouted back. "She loves you so much, George. She has all your posters on her hospital room wall. She made me promise that if I ever met you, I'd tell you that your music helps her not be scared." George felt his throat tighten. He looked out at this mother who was clearly desperate, who had somehow made it to his concert while her daughter was dying in a hospital. The pain in her voice was unmistakable, and it cut straight through his heart. "Where is Lucy now?" George asked. "Great Ormond Street Hospital," Linda called back. "She's been there for 3 weeks. She can barely keep her eyes open, but when I play your songs, she smiles." George stood at the edge of the stage for a moment, looking at this grieving mother, then out at the 50,000 people who had come to hear him sing. He was facing an impossible choice: continue with his planned concert for all these fans who had paid to see him, or do something unprecedented that might help one dying little girl. There was no choice at all. "Ladies and gentlemen," George announced to the stadium, "I need your help with something very important. Linda, can you hear me clearly?" "Yes," Linda shouted back, tears streaming down her face. I want to call Lucy. Right now. Will someone please bring me a phone? The stadium erupted in applause, but it wasn't the usual screaming and cheering. It was supportive, emotional applause from 50,000 people who realized they were about to witness something extraordinary. George's tour manager, Simon, appeared at the side of the stage with a mobile phone, a rare and expensive piece of technology in 1991. George took the phone and turned back to Linda. Linda, what's the hospital's number? Linda shouted out the number, and someone in the crowd with a pen wrote it on a piece of paper and passed it down to security, who rushed it to the stage. George dialed the number while 50,000 people waited in complete silence. Great Ormond Street Hospital Children's Ward, came the voice of the night nurse. Hello, this is George Michael, George said into the phone, his voice being amplified through the stadium speakers. I know this sounds crazy, but I'm at Wembley Stadium, and I need to speak to Lucy Matthews. Her mother is here, and she told me that that she's very sick. There was a pause on the other end. I'm sorry. Who is this? This is George Michael, the singer. I'm in concert right now at Wembley Stadium with 50,000 people, and Lucy's mother Linda is here. She says Lucy is my fan and... Please, can I talk to her? Another pause. Then, Mr. Michael, Lucy has been asking for you. She's been saying your name all day. Hold on. George turned to the crowd while he waited. Lucy is 12 years old and she's fighting leukemia. Her mom Linda came to our concert tonight because she wanted to tell us that Lucy loves our music. We're going to sing to Lucy right now. The phone crackled to life again. This time it was a small, weak voice that could barely whisper. Hello? Lucy? George said gently. This is George. Michael. Your mom is here with me at Wembley Stadium, and she told me you're my biggest fan. The silence that followed was heartbreaking. Then, in a voice so quiet that George had to strain to hear it. George, is it really you? It's really me, sweetheart. And I have 50,000 friends here with me who all want to say hello to you. Really? Lucy's voice was filled with wonder despite her obvious weakness. Really? Lucy, your mom tells me you're very brave. She says you've been fighting really hard. I'm scared, George. Lucy's honesty broke the hearts of everyone listening. It hurts a lot. George felt tears forming in his eyes. I know you're scared, sweetheart, but you know what? You're not alone. Your mom loves you so much that she came all the way here just to tell me about you. And now you have 50,000 new friends who are all thinking about you. Can you sing for me? Lucy asked, her voice barely audible. Of course, sweetheart. What song would you like to hear? Careless Whisper. It's my favorite. Mummy plays it for me every night. George looked out at the massive crowd, then back at the phone. Lucy, I'm going to sing Careless Whisper just for you. And I want you to know that every single person in this stadium is singing it with me, just for you. George signaled to his band, and the familiar opening notes of Careless Whisper began to fill Wembley Stadium. But this wasn't a performance. It was a lullaby for a dying child. George sang differently than he ever had before. His voice was gentle, tender, like he was singing to his own daughter. I feel so unsure taking your hand and leading you to the dance floor. What happened next was the most beautiful moment in concert history. 50,000 people began singing along, but quietly, softly, creating the most gentle choir for one little girl lying in a hospital bed miles away. Through the phone, they could hear Lucy trying to sing along, her weak voice barely audible but filled with joy. As the music dies, something in your eyes calls to mind a silver screen. There wasn't a dry eye in Wembley Stadium. Grown men were sobbing, teenagers were crying, parents were holding their own children tighter, imagining what Linda was going through. When the song ended, George spoke into the phone again. "Lucy, did you hear that? All those people singing just for you?" "It was beautiful," Lucy whispered. "Thank you, George. Lucy, I want you to listen to me very carefully, okay? You are so loved. Your mummy loves you, I love you, and 50,000 people here love you. And when you're not scared anymore, when the pain stops, I want you to know that it's okay to rest." "Will you remember me?" Lucy asked. George's voice broke completely. "Lucy Matthews, I will remember you for the rest of my life. Every time I sing Careless Whisper, I'm going to think about you and how brave you are. I love you, George. I love you too, sweetheart." The phone went quiet. Then they heard Linda's voice. But this time it wasn't coming from the crowd. It was coming through the phone. "George, this is Lucy's doctor. I'm here with Linda's sister, Sarah. Lucy just closed her eyes. She's peaceful now. She's not in pain anymore." The silence in Wembley Stadium was complete. 50,000 people stood in absolute quiet, processing what they had just witnessed. This little girl had died while listening to 50,000 people sing her favorite song. George stood on the stage, holding the phone, tears streaming down his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried clearly through the stadium. "Ladies and gentlemen, Lucy Matthews just went to heaven while we were singing to her. She was 12 years old, and she was braver than any of us will ever be." George looked out into the crowd until he found Linda, who was being supported by her sister and surrounded by strangers who had become friends through shared grief. "Linda," George called out. "Lucy heard us. She heard all of us, and she wasn't alone." What followed was 20 minutes of silence. Not planned, not announced, just 50,000 people standing quietly in honor of a little girl they had never met, but had all come to love. When George finally continued the concert, every song was dedicated to Lucy Matthews. He announced that all proceeds from that night's concert would go to the Children's Cancer Ward at Great Ormond Street Hospital. But the most important part of that night happened after the concert. George went directly to the hospital, where he spent the night with Linda, helping her say goodbye to her daughter and making sure Lucy was buried with the concert program from that night. The story of Lucy Matthews and the phone call that connected her to 50,000 strangers spread around the world. It became a symbol of how music can create instant family, how love can travel through telephone lines and fill stadiums, and how sometimes the most important moments in our lives happen when we stop everything to pay attention to what really matters. Great Ormond Street Hospital established the Lucy Matthews Music Therapy Program, which uses music to help children cope with serious illnesses. Linda Matthews became a spokesperson for the program and spent the rest of her life helping other families navigate childhood cancer. George Michael kept his promise. For the rest of his career, every time he sang Careless Whisper, he would pause before the first verse and say quietly, "This is for Lucy." Most audiences never knew why, but those who had been at Wembley that night always remembered. The concert recording from that night became one of the most treasured bootleg recordings among George Michael fans, not because of the music, but because it captured the moment when 50,000 strangers became a family, united by love for a little girl they would never meet. Sometimes the most powerful performances aren't about entertaining an audience. They're about using whatever platform you have to make sure someone knows they're not alone. That night at Wembley, George Michael reminded everyone that music isn't just about fame or success or even talent. It's about connection, love, and the way a song can hold someone's hand across the distance between life and death. Lucy Matthews lived for 6 more minutes after that phone call ended. 6 minutes during which she knew she was loved by 50,000 people she'd never met, sung to sleep by her favorite singer, and surrounded by more love than most people experience in a lifetime. If this incredible story of love transcending distance and music bringing comfort in the darkest moments moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that we're never truly alone. Have you ever experienced the healing power of music during difficult times? Let us know in the comments below.